over the Ministry of Education. How much of interface have you had with the ministry, with the ministers of education and the universal basic education? Because it looks like an institution that has been set up and just allowed to run. How much of oversight have you done with them?
Yes, normally I always say, Neta, that oversight is not a one-off thing, it's work in progress, and we are all involved in this. If there was no outcry about the cutoff mark, probably you and I may not know what is going on. It might just be the few parents who are caught in the quagmire. But once this has been put on the table, I think that our Committee on Education would now take it up from there. It doesn't end with the current issue at stake, the 2003 cutoff marks. It now opens the doors for us to look into other aspects of our education policy, and that is why I talked about the federal government. They will now need to do a lot more engagement to ensure that what the education policy is implemented to the letter instead of just glossing over them.
Do you think that there's a need to also look into maybe, say, JAMB or NECO, but all of these exams and the performance of students?
Of course, if we have to get it right, if we have to get it right, we have to go the whole hog. Well, like you and I know, these peoples that come from the primary school level and get into secondary education, they have a unified examination that they take, which is at the JSS 3 level. And going forward, at senior school certificate level, they do WAEC and NECO. And these examinations does not take into consideration what we might call federal character. And so if we must have a straight and enduring educational policy, because at the end of the day, it is the human capital index that determines what happens to a country. It is not even the number of roads you build or the number of critical infrastructure. Yes, they are important, but the human capital element of it is something that you can't wish away. And as a responsible and responsive house, I think that going forward, some of us would stay on this issue and ensure that at the level of WAEC and NECO, that something positive is done.
Okay, do you think there will be a need, either with the committee or the House, to have this conversation directly with the Ministry of Education? Because not just this about the cutoff mark, and the last time it was JAMB, and let's take a look at that slide again, but some couldn't actually believe that you could actually be allowed to get 2 or 4 to get in. Would you be talking to them to find out what was the rationale behind coming up with these kind of cutoff marks and to see how you could stop that from recurring?
Well, like I did indicate earlier, it was intended as a stopgap measure over 40 years ago so that we could have students and peoples from all corners of the country. But as it is today, we must, as a matter of urgent public good, do something positive to improve standards in all the states. And to be able to do that, we need further engagement with the relevant authorities. You talked about the Federal Ministry of Education, and for me, it is not just the Federal Ministry of Education, it's the whole hog. I know that in the not too distant past, even communities were proud to send brilliant children who were either indigent or were orphans. You had public-spirited members of communities actually send them to school. And even we as parents, Yes, some parents do their bit, but I think that we need to do a lot more. How much time do we have now to spend even with our kids and impart some level of knowledge to them? And the teachers must also be properly remunerated. It shouldn't just be being a teacher because there are a scarcity or paucity of jobs out there. We must pay them the right wages and engage them properly so that the products that come out, because at the end of the day, we keep saying the youths are the leaders of tomorrow. What kind of leaders are you going to produce that has not gone through the whole hog of training for the total human being? Even religious organizations, in the past we know that their involvement in education also brought about a certain moral rectitude in the society. But so we need to declare some sort of emergency in some parts of our educational system so that all the stakeholders can come together and begin to re-engineer our educational sector once again.
Well, the House of Representatives is definitely, will I say, limited in its role in terms of what it can do. What do you see it pushing the limits of what exactly it can do? Did you catch my question?
Sorry, I didn't quite get that, Mape.
Yes, I was saying that the House of Representatives, in terms of being a legislative body, is limited in terms of what it can do. But you've stated a host of things that we need to do at different levels. Do you see the House of Reps possibly pushing the limits in terms of what it can do so as to be able to do some of the things that you've stated here?
Yes, I think that the House of I think that the House of Representatives can do, and the National Assembly for that matter, and including state legislatures, can do a lot more than we are currently doing. Yes, we are circumscribed by the principles of separation of powers. You can have all the good laws in the books, but it takes another arm of government to implement it. I just told you about Chapter 2, Section 18, derivative principles of state policy. Under Section 18, Sub 1, it is the fundamental right of a child to get free and compulsory education. But it is not happening, and people who are supposed to enforce this are not doing that, or are doing it in breach or in fragments. So for us as a parliament, I think that we can do a lot more by setting this agenda. If we set the agenda and hold summits and hold these people to account, we can actually properly hold them to account. And that is why even in the current constitution amendment process, some people have advocated that Chapter 2 of the Constitution should be made justiciable. But you and I know that it's almost a tall order in this past, because if you say there has to be housing for everyone, then every other day some people who have lost their housing can actually take the government to court. But education is so basic to our lives that we can actually declare some form of emergency such that we put it has to be a partnership between the parliament, civil society organizations, journalists, the ministry officials, whoever, so that the laws that we have at least on ground, we can attempt to implement them, if not 100%, at least by 80%. And I think that it is achievable. For instance, we can begin with this cutoff mark. I don't think that the blame should be laid squarely on the peoples from some of these states that are giving low cutoff marks. There are issues arising therefrom. Some of them, the language of instruction. If you teach a child in a local language, if it comes to an examination where English language is the basis, then that child might have a problem competing with the others. And then we know that we have current insecurity issues.